Welcome to Breathe In, Scream Out, a podcast for feeling it all, one breath and scream at a time. I'm Katie Healy, your guide through this sacred mess called life. Here in this podcast, we'll feel everything. We'll cry, we'll laugh, we'll scream, and maybe scream again. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to Breathe In, Scream Out. I'm your host, Katie Healy. I'm so excited to be bringing you this interview episode today with Kate Lombardo. Kate is a speaker, an entrepreneur, and a mentor who helps people recognize their strengths, ask better questions, and lead with grounded confidence. She is also the yoga director at Yoga Renew, and she is the co-founder of Rooted. She's also one of my favorite people, a dear friend of mine. We've been working together for over a decade. She is one of my favorite people to talk to about everything and nothing with. She is such an inspiration to me as a leader in our community. Everything she's done in terms of shifting her life from where she was to where she wanted to be. And as usual, I could just always use a good, healthy, full of self-awareness dose of positivity, which is what she brings, and a real authenticity in who she is and how she wants to use her voice and share her gifts with the world. So before we get into our conversation, we'll start this podcast the way we always do, with some breath and a scream, and really just prepare ourselves for the conversation ahead, which I think you're really going to enjoy. So wherever you are, seated, standing, just taking a moment, if you can, to close your eyes. If not, just holding them open with a soft gaze. Whatever feels best and right for you. Feeling your feet beneath you. Allowing yourself, even if it's just the only moment you have today, to find a little grounding and center. Just breathe as you normally would, in and out through your nose, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Just allowing the day, the week, the month just to settle a little bit. Let it fall away. We'll take a few rounds of breath together. I'll guide us through, but feel free to take all the time you need. Take a deep inhale through your nose. Exhale it out through your mouth. Another deep inhale through your nose. Exhale, sigh it out through the mouth. This final round of breath, if you'd like to let out a scream, a big sigh, into your hands, out into an open space, whatever you need today, take it, it's yours. One more deep inhale through your nose, hold it at the top. A sigh or some sound out through your mouth. Take a moment, flutter the lips, roll your shoulders, or just find a little bit of quiet. Feel your seat beneath you, your feet beneath you. Just gently start to flutter your eyes open if they were closed. Feel yourself coming back into the space, your seat, your feet. Let's get into it. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Kate as much as I enjoyed having it. Kate Lombardo, welcome to Breathe In, Scream Out. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Me too. I am so excited to talk to you, as always.
And first question we always start with, what are you screaming about?
So I've thought about this question because I'm a listener to your podcast also. I think for me, the thing I'm like screaming about the most right now, just based on everything, like the current climate and culture that we're all existing in, is like this idea that things don't have to always be hard in order for them to be worth something and or to be like worthy. And I think we operate a lot right now in like this idea of hustle culture and overcoming hardships and fighting the struggle, and there's a place for that, and there's a lot that I think we need to be fighting against right now, but I also think it doesn't have to be and can't be and isn't safe for it to be us in that mode 100% of the time. And that I think there has to be some room for us to like soften and slow down and focus on things that bring us joy and things that we love and celebrate those things and find success in our strengths and kind of leaning into that piece more. Because I feel like it can get really easy to slip into like some of the doomsday stuff when there's still a lot for us to focus on and be grateful for. And so I think that's what I'd be screaming about. Like, it's okay to still find the joy and to embrace that.
Yeah, like joy and rest are also acts of resistance.
Yes, 100%. And I feel like I'm learning that more. I didn't always, I think, move from that space. And I think I actually naturally tend to probably lean, because you've told me and helped me with my astrology chart. I know like I'm an Aries, I'm a Pitta in Ayurveda, I'm like all fire in all things. And it's easier and more comfortable actually, I think, for me to kind of be in the like fight, go, push. But I feel like the more that I've tried to embrace kind of the softer side of that, the better it feels. And actually, in a lot of ways, the more effective it has become. You know, I think if it's always coming from this place of like pushing and struggle, like you said, like there's resistance and rest too. And I think that there can be a lot of success in that sometimes, in like being the one to step back and just like, hey, are you okay? And like take a deep breath and not always come from, guns out all the time.
Yeah, and I think I know you well for
Yeah.
almost a decade now,
I
which
know, it's
is
crazy.
crazy. But I think, depending especially on, sure, your design as a person, right? Like your
Yeah.
cosmic blueprint, but also the way we're raised, the gender, like how whatever generation we're in, especially us millennials, how this idea of the hustle and the harder you work, the more you'll reap the reward, and hard
Yeah.
work and listening to the analytical mind over dropping into the body and listening to the intuitive, the way you're raised, like
Yeah.
Irish, super Irish Catholic.
Yep. Same.
That is not what we were doing.
Not in the least. Nope. And I think it's like not what society has encouraged, like it's interesting. I'll turn 40 this year and like being in that, I'm like, I think I'm like a mid millennial, I guess. There's like range older
Yeah.
than me and younger me,
Right.
whatever, but definitely in that millennial space. I feel like our generation has been the one that was like, embrace entrepreneurship, or what do they call it? Like the gig culture, like that kind of thing kind of came up with us with the growth of social media and all of this. But when I think back, even to like when I started into entrepreneurship, so much of the conversation then was like embracing like the grind, the hustle, the work hard, play hard, and was still driven by like a very masculine way of approaching things, And I think it's because it was like, there was still that piece of it where like that grew out of whatever existed before us, where it was more, I hate to like make this a male female thing, but there was a lot more men like lending their voices to, like if you think of the first rounds of people that were like, hey, do this, and like this is how we should live, and this is how, even in the like go against the corporate world and like do your own thing, it was still through the lens of like grind, hustle, push. And I feel like it's only in recent years that we're like, do we have to do it that way? Where I feel like there's a lot more women and millennial women and people who are like, what, like the way that I was raised and also the way society has kind of adopted the messaging, which bleeds into everything. It's not just business and entrepreneurship, obviously, but like the way social media works is like, can it actually come from feeling regulated? I don't know that it has to be from like grind and push all the time. But I think that voice is starting to get louder, which is important. But I don't think it's been there for long enough. Like, I think we need to strengthen that for sure.
Well, I have an astrological answer for that. Pluto, the planet of death, birth, transformation, was in Capricorn, literally the daddy of the zodiac, for 20
Okay.
years.
Yeah.
And it just switched into Aquarius, which is the outside of the box, like go your
Yeah.
own way. There are no rules, make your own. So one of the many reasons I think is because of that. And then also, when you just think back ancestrally, most of us, I mean, depending on where our ancestors, since none of us are actually from America, came
Literally.
here, depending on whether it was your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, so much of their time was only spent on the basics, being able to
Yes.
survive, like food,
Yes.
shelter, water, take care of the kids, keep them alive, send them to school, and we're the first generation that has
Yeah.
had the privilege.
Yes.
We're two white ladies sitting here talking about all of this and, like,
100%.
the privilege to actually even think, "Oh, I
Yeah.
wanna leave my stable teaching job, and become a yoga
Huh.
teacher. This is what I love. I wanna
Yeah.
be an actor. I wanna have a podcast." We have the opportunity to do these things. So it's also not even just, like, the stars, just the
Yeah.
cycle of the way life has gone and the access we have to things, social media, TV, news. We could say, "Oh, actually, that doesn't work for me." And it's the first time we've
100%.
really had the opportunity to do that.
Yes. And I think, which is such a gift and also comes with like a lot of responsibility though, I think, to do it and to think about like what does that mean in terms of us for the generation right behind us and the example that we're setting as mentors, and then for like those for people for who are having children and like raising the next generation that comes up after that, like what does that look like in terms of with I think isn't that what's like the Spider-Man quote? This is where I become. There's like some kind of Spider-Man quote with like with
Great
something
power comes great responsibility.
responsibility. That's what it is. And I think that that's like that is true, right? We are kind of the first generation that has had the privilege in the space to even imagine, okay, you can be anything that you want. Okay, that's great. There's like an open-ended book and this like canvas that you get to paint however, but like also that shapes a lot of things. And if you do it with not being responsible, it can have a lot of negative effects too. And I
Mm.
think giving voice to that is really important. Like doing it in a way that's going to be safe for our own nervous systems and take care of us, but then also affect our communities and the teams that we're leading and society as a whole in like a way that's helpful and more beneficial to everybody. I think that it's very easy to get self-centered almost in viewing that like there is, I think, a millennial thing of like, well, I get to be happy because I have these opportunities. I get to do what I want. And it's like, yes, but how you do that affects other people too. And I feel like that's also kind of what we're facing. And sometimes where some of this like anger is coming from, when I think, again, if we leaned into some more listening and softness and
Mm.
pause, I think there might be more room for us to explore all aspects of that.
Definitely. Again, two white ladies sitting
Yes,
here doing this podcast.
very aware of that.
I'm so aware. And it's easy for people to see us on social media, to listen to this podcast, to think that must be nice, right? That must be really
Totally.
nice that they can live in this space. You even more than maybe I have fully embraced the softness and the openness and the trust. But I'd love to hear a little more or for you to share
Yeah,
how you got to this place because it's certainly not where you started,
not at
and
all.
all the choices, the really hard choices that you had to make to have a different life and to be this version of yourself that you are right now.
Yeah. And I think, thank you for, yeah, giving me the kind of space to do that. Cause I think where I've landed here definitely is not where I started. And it is easy to look, well, again, acknowledging just the natural privilege that exists with us, but then also to look at where someone is now and assume that it was easy to get there. And I think that's not always the case. Like, so kind of my background story and where it's always so crazy to me that I like this is kind of where it starts, but it was very formative, for me. I went to Rutgers. Like I grew up, like you said, Irish Catholic in New Jersey. I had two wonderful parents, but we certainly were not wealthy by
Mhm.
any means. And that plays into the story, I promise. There's a point to that piece, but definitely in this mindset of like money doesn't grow on trees, and like we made choices to try to like stabilize ourselves. And I think a big piece of where I am so grateful to my parents was like, you can be anything you want, go after your dreams. But I also don't know that there was a ton of education, not just from my family, but from the community I was in on like, okay, but what does it actually take to achieve them? I went to Rutgers and I was like, I'm going to be an actress. And that was like my thing. I did theater my whole life. I moved to New York City right after graduating and was like, I'm going to live in the Upper East Side. And Gossip Girl was a thing back then. And I do remember, and this is where like I'll credit my parents, were like, maybe you should consider like Brooklyn or Hoboken. And I was like, I
Okay.
will not be doing that. I will be living in the Upper East Side, which is what I did because, again, all the fire, and I am extremely stubborn. But this was 2008. And so I moved there September of 2008 to do this. And then October of 2008 is like when the economy completely fell apart and we headed for that recession. So not only were there no like acting jobs, it was like there was nothing. I was like graduated from college, waiting tables. Even that was slow. And I right away, very quickly got into this space of like, oh, I can't even audition for things because I'm literally working double or triple shifts at a restaurant in order to pay rent. And I was like very, very broke, like rationing, going and getting like a caprese salad from the pizza place, and there would be 8 slices of mozzarella and like 4 were for dinner this night and saving 4 for the next. And like if that was just the situation I was in, and I very quickly was like, oh, so like pursuing my dreams to do this acting thing, that's not actually that easy. Like you still need some level of financial stability, like kind of like back to what you were saying, like your basic needs have to be met before you have space to pursue your dreams. And I ran myself into the ground from a health perspective and got pretty run down. That November, that all manifested in my lung collapsing while I was living in New York City. And again, 2008, this is pre-President Obama, pre-Obamacare. So I had no health insurance because I had just graduated from college. And at that time, it was like you graduated and you were dropped from your parents' health insurance. I was waiting tables. I was, prior to this, healthy and just like didn't get health insurance. And so I found myself suddenly with as much medical debt as student loan debt at 22 years old. And there was a lot of physical healing that was required. Following that, I left New York City, moved back in with my parents, and it like rocked my world. I think it was the first time that I was like, oh, so I don't get to just like do whatever I want just because it feels good to do it. You know, like failure felt suddenly like more of a thing than success. And I was like such an eternal optimist, and that like really knocked me physically on my ground. I was embarrassed to like move back in with my parents at the time. I didn't know what to do next. And I also was like financially really in trouble because I had like tens and tens of thousands of dollars of hospital bills and my student loan bills. And I remember just like looking at my bank account at one point and seeing like negative $80 at the same time that like I ended up sued by my doctor. It was like a disaster. It was a mess. And so I decided I would do the thing that felt the most stable and predictable. And I was like, I will become a teacher because I knew that, right? I had been a student, I knew education. And so I had been an English minor in college. I was able to be an alternate route certificate teacher in New Jersey, and I got a job as a high school teacher in a great district. And it gave me a steady paycheck, and it gave me health insurance and stability. And that kind of helped me to dig myself out of, I think, like that financial hole. But what it also put me in a situation was like I was not satisfied by the work I was doing. I just like made a decision to settle based only on the fear of not having enough. And I was miserable. Like it just was like such an unfulfilling time in my life. I liked teaching, but there was a lot about it that I just felt totally unfulfilled by. But I didn't know what else to do because I feel like I had learned this hard lesson of just like I chose the big jump, big leap, and it failed so miserably. Like, how do I then try something else? And so during that time, my last year teaching or second to last year teaching, I was just like pretty unhappy and down and just really focused on how much I didn't like my job. And the question was so much conversation and toxicity around like the things I didn't like and the things I didn't enjoy and how I didn't want this to be my life. And then I decided to do a yoga teacher training, and that shifted everything for me. Like during that training, I think my awareness was drawn to how I had been focused on everything I didn't want. And I was focused very little on what I did. Like, what did I actually want? My dream of being an actress didn't work out. And so, well, what was the next dream? And I hadn't had like given myself permission to imagine that. And so I decided I wanted to teach yoga because I enjoyed it. And old habits die hard. My last year teaching, I was like, let's go the extreme again. I'm going to quit my teaching job and go all in on just pursuing this entrepreneurial dream of teaching yoga. So that's what I did next, was just leave my stable job and burn that to the ground and start from scratch again. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that path to anybody. I don't regret it because I learned so much along the way. But I think it's just that I was very much in this all or nothing space of just being like, I would just let everything kind of burn to ashes before rebuilding it, and got comfortable there. It was like I had hit rock bottom already. I knew what it meant to be super broke. And so I knew I could crawl myself out of that. And I was willing to like continue waiting tables or doing whatever I needed to do to just kind of like get back on track for pursuing something that felt meaningful. But thankfully, like, you know, those early years of entrepreneurship were this hustle culture we're talking about, where I was working 60, 70 hours a week. I was teaching yoga, working at the front desk, working 30 hours a week in a freelance marketing position, running local wellness events, like pretty much anything I could do to piece together some type of financial stability for myself. And I loved it. I loved each of the jobs that I did. And that part was so exciting and cool. But if you want to talk like nervous system and burnout, like it's not sustainable to work 60 or 70 hours a week, even doing things that you love. There was like zero downtime and rest time. And I can operate in that space, as you know, and have seen me do for a very long time. And I did it for a while. And then eventually, little by little, like certain things started to fall away once I became a yoga studio owner, which is where we got to connect and meet. I was at least still working probably just as many hours, but focused in like one place, which energetically felt a little bit better. And then in 2018, I experienced a miscarriage, and that is not like a huge part of my story because it was like the best version of a miscarriage you could have, I guess, sort of like sad, of course, always, but the timing for me, it never felt like it was like the right thing. Like right away, I felt like something was wrong, and I was told nothing was. And then the fact that it was made me actually feel very validated that I wasn't crazy. But in kind of the healing process from that, my husband booked a trip to Miami for us, and we took like a weekend. And I read this book called You're a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. And it like reopened my eyes to the fact that I was like, oh, I still haven't like done the work. Like I thought that I had, and that I'm like pursuing things I love, but like I'm still stuck in like the same stuff that happened, the same fear patterns that existed after my lung collapsed, in how I grew up. Money isn't on trees, this hustle to like everything has to be hard to achieve financial success and time success. And it was like a huge awakening for me. And I spent a full year really trying to unpack that and really like doing the deep work to try to break some of those like old scarcity habits, which was a process I did sort of throughout 2019. And funny enough, it led me right up to then facing in 2020 the closure of our studios because of COVID, which I know you were very much there alongside for the ride of, but Hoboken was the first place in the country to close, and they closed yoga studios before restaurants. So it was literally, I feel like we were one of the first businesses to get closed down at the start of the pandemic. And they closed our studios, and that was 2 weeks before I had my first child. I was like 36 weeks pregnant at the time. And it was interesting because that should have scared the shit out of me. And it wasn't great. I wouldn't like love becoming a mom in a pandemic while my businesses were going bankrupt again. But it was the first time that I noticed that my nervous system was okay. I wasn't like petrified. It was bad. Like it was really bad. Like the businesses went bankrupt. Like it wasn't great. But I like had done enough work to be like, oh, somehow this is going to be okay. I didn't know how, but I was like, we're going to be okay. This isn't like the end of this. And I think that was the first time that I started to see a shift where I realized sometimes just like sitting and pausing could be powerful instead of just going into go mode the whole time. And thankfully that was correct, where then in sort of the way that things align, like in our commitment to shifting things online, we were able to join forces with Yoga Renew and bring a huge bulk of our team from our studios along with us and grow this kind of next iteration of what this has become for these last years. For these last like 6 years, really, it's kind of just been, there's been seasons of hustle in there, and I slip very easily back into that mode. I think of like, it's comfortable, right? The going in terms of just like making me feel busy feels productive and successful, but I've continued to try to realize that the bigger jumps and shifts have happened when I've actually like embraced the pausing and not just made these like rash decisions from a place of like stress and fear, and instead like listen to be like, okay, what's actually right? Even if I don't understand it, can I trust it? Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to.
No, not at all. You answered the question that I asked, and it encapsulates so much of what we've already kind of touched on, this idea that so much of this, especially a certain generation, we can speak for millennials because that's what we are.
Yeah.
And, what we've seen in our parents too, it's almost like this hustle culture wasn't an option. It
Yeah.
wasn't, there was no other option presented to us. And that's
Yeah.
not in every family system, but I think, if you're born
Yeah.
in the 80s, early 90s, there's this idea that you have to be willing to work hard for what you want, which I don't disagree with to a certain extent. You have to,
Yes.
there is a season to
Yeah.
put in the hours, to like focus. I'll never diminish that. And I am perpetrator number one of
Mhm.
the harder I work, the more I'll get, or the more I prove my worth through how hard I work, the more I'll achieve. But I think it's conditioning, it's astrology, it's gender roles, it's all of the above. But I've seen over the last decade how you've switched the mindset. And I think it can feel so out of reach when you're not doing it. And I also think, which I'm sure you'll agree with, in the wellness world, there's this idea that once you do the work, you master it, you never have to go back. You've done it. You got the
Not
certificate, you passed the
true.
test, and in some way, astrologically too, these karmic life lessons, it's going to keep
Yeah.
presenting itself to you and you have a choice. So I'd love to hear a little bit how you mentioned the book, but like how you even started to shift
Mhm.
your mindset in terms of, oh, maybe it doesn't have to be this way, and then what that looked like for you in the shifting of the mindset.
Yeah. And I also think you bring up a good thing because I realize I'm like back in a season of even in thinking of what's next, right? Is like, oh, I'm facing those same things. Like those, like gotten to this point now. I work with a business coach, and then I promise I'll answer your question. But I was just talking about, I was like, okay, so in like this next season of career, motherhood, like wherever this goes, what does this look like? And she said to me, she's like, well, you're not going to accomplish the next season by doing the things that it took to get you to this one. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, you're right. And it's like, even what got me here, and there was a lot of hustle involved in that. While I'm starting to pause now that I'm like, oh, I want to achieve something else, I feel myself right away. Like you said, it's like these lessons going back to like, oh, if I want to achieve this, I'll just go back to a place of hustle. And she's like, you literally can't work anymore. Like you don't have like, you can't do everything you're doing, try to keep that and add on more. Like at some point, the strategy has to shift in terms of how you look
Mm.
at things, and those lessons have to be learned. I just think you called out something really important, which is that we continue to learn these lessons. And even when we get to a certain point, they'll creep back in. And I think in the wellness world and anything, it's like, there isn't necessarily like I'm done with this forever. Like a lot of that is just a lifetime of getting better at it and improving them. And I don't think you have to learn them as harshly as maybe we do
Yeah.
in our younger years. It gets a little easier, but I don't know that we ever stop learning. So I think that's an important
Mm.
thing. But I think a big piece of what I did, so that book really opened my eyes to it. Awareness was a huge piece of unlearning things, just being called to examine that a lot of what I believed was true was not necessarily true, right? Like the truths that we hold don't, they're our truths. They're not necessarily like finite truths that exist everywhere. And people have different versions of that. And being like, oh, this is what I believe, but I can change my beliefs. And then kind of being willing to embrace the fact that I had to understand there was a lot that I didn't know. And also embrace like, that some of those lessons came from places and people that I admire and loved deeply, right? But
Mm.
that doesn't mean that every lesson I learned from them was useful and healthy, because they have their own stuff that they're unlearning. And having to then like put boundaries around that in some of the current relationships that I had, because I think they say something like, you're most like the 5 people you spend the most time with. And it was like looking at the people that I spend the most time with, like, what are the stories all of these people are telling themselves, right? And am I sharing in that same story of struggle, of scarcity, of the hard work having to be super hard? And I agree. I think there is a season of hustle that like kind of has to happen. And I think there's actually at times recently we're going sometimes too far to the other side, where there's all this messaging of like, I sit on the beach and work from my
Oh,
phone
yeah.
for 6
No, I
hours,
mean,
and I'm like,
it's
"That's
so
bullshit."
American. It's so
Yeah.
American. Like,
It's
we're
like
one way, we like
no.
the
Yes.
extremes in which
And
we
it's like,
feel we
that's
need to
not
exist.
true either. Like, you can't just like meditate your way to success. Like, I think it's like there's a combo of both. But I do think it can't always be that way. Smart work can lead to success. Like, I don't think that hard work has to feel soul draining all the time in order for it to be useful. And that, I think, is the mentality that I had to shift, is like, oh, it's okay to like enjoy it and still find success and worth in that. So part of it was trying to then start surrounding myself with people and making language choices and rewriting stories that I held to be true and unpack some of those truths. Like a very simple one, if we're going back to the money thing, was like, yeah, this idea of like money doesn't grow on trees. And it's like, okay, that was like so ingrained in what I accepted. It's just like that means like there's not enough, like you're not going to be able to find it from places. And that didn't feel negative to me. It just felt like a normal, yeah, of course it doesn't, right? Versus like money comes to me easily. There's opportunity everywhere. Like that small mindset shift and adopting the one that like there's opportunity everywhere, I can always make more money, took a long time for me to trust in, because it was so, and still does at times, if I'm honest, but like literally rewriting those. Like I wrote a list of old beliefs I held and then rewrote them to what I wanted them to be. And then went through months of like fake it till you make it, where it was like just calling myself out on the old habits, acknowledging them, saying the new thing, even if I didn't believe it yet, and working that way. I also did mind body integration, like hypnosis work, which was a lot of like hypnosis in terms of revisiting childhood, adolescent patterns where things kind of got rooted from, and seeing if I could unpack and forgive those. So that was like a 6 series session that I did with a healer that was like really useful, I think, in unpacking some of that from like a somatic perspective. And just starting to be, the third thing I would say was like, I started to get really specific and mindful in terms of like the content that I allowed into my consciousness. Like I was like started being like, okay, like if I want to put myself into the place of living more happily, of having more time freedom, of living with more of an abundance mindset, of people who believe they're slowing down, like I need to try to surround myself with people like that. And I didn't have a ton of actual like human, like in my actual circle of friends, but it was like every time I'd walk down to the studio, I was like listening to podcasts of people who were like moving from that space, who had done it and could give voice to that. I was reading books from that, listening to audiobooks, like turning off, making sure to mute posts online that like were contrary to that. Just trying to be really mindful of like what I allowed into my own headspace, because it was, you know, very easy for me to just like get my confidence shook if I saw someone giving voice to the negativity the negativity biases that I already held, and just rewriting a lot of those patterns. And I think that that's like work that I've continued to try to do. And again, it's like, I can feel it though. The times that I don't consciously pay attention to it, even though it's come so far and I don't think I'll ever slip back to where I started, there are times when I get lazy with it and I'm like, oh no, I'm like back into, you know, where suddenly my Instagram feed has like these like, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. I must have engaged with content or said things or done whatever that's like not really in the headspace that I want to be. And I think it does still take constant care, right, to like surround ourselves and be in the reality and the story that we actually want to adopt.
And there's a lot of things you shared that I want to touch on, community and the people you surround yourself with being one of them, because I think you've done and shown people who are looking for community or looking how to build community, how to do it in such an authentic and really grounded way. But also this idea that when we're shifting these beliefs that are so deeply ingrained in us, it can borderline between like hypervigilance, and you use the word care. So I am someone who leans towards hypervigilance with myself. I am up my ass. Like I don't leave myself alone in when I'm trying to make a change, or, you know, sometimes I feel like a really rooted sense of awareness, self-awareness can be a curse in moments
Yeah.
because we can go into, especially us like hustle culture kids that do the right thing, work hard, we can almost go too far.
Yeah.
So how do you find the balance between, like the word you used, care,
Mhm.
around the awareness and the hypervigilance of going too, because someone, like you use the example, could start seeing things in their feed where, oh no, I must have given in or I must have slipped off. And we can really toe the line. I find women, women identifying folks in general to be like so hyper vigilant with
Yes.
ourselves.
I think so. A few years back, I did a positive psychology training. And one of the things that I took out of that training, one of my teachers called himself a recovering perfectionist. And I've like latched onto that term in a way because it felt very powerful to me as someone who I think, to your point, perfectionism exists in culture. And I do think that there was like it was a big piece of that same mindset of like how you do your best 100% of the time. And like, if you're not giving 110%, then you're not doing it well enough. And there was so much conversation around like, okay, recovering perfectionist, you can't be perfect in all things all the time. It's just like not possible. And also, this life's journey is about messing up and like making mistakes,
Learning.
and that's how we learn. And when you look at like child development, right? Like kids learn by like fearlessly trying and failing. My son is right now learning to read, and we were just reading a book last night, and like he has no care over the fact that he reads the words wrong. He's not embarrassed by it because he's learning. And then I don't know what happens, but we like lose that at some point, and we're so afraid to try and like mess up that then it stops us completely from doing anything, and we start to blame ourselves, and that self-talk of like, you're such an idiot, you're so stupid, like at least maybe that's my own self-talk of like, kind
Me
of to
too.
your point, it's like when I'm like letting that in, it's like, oh, you did it again, like you're so whatever. Where does that come from, and how do we I've tried, and I'm not perfect at it, but if thinking about how to do it from care, it's like, okay, no, I'm a recovering perfectionist. I don't have to be perfect all the time. And that's me trying to embrace, and you've seen this in the work that we do together, this like idea of done is better than perfect is like one of the hardest lessons that I've ever learned and still have to learn. Like for me to put something out publicly, I just would do nothing at times. Like I'd be paralyzed and there would be nothing out there because I was so like, every little word and every font, there can't be a typo, there can't be this. And then the stupid thing is then I'm like, okay, it's perfect. And then it's still not actually. Like then you go out and there's still a mistake and you put something out there and that's what happens. And it's like, there's a middle ground for that. I think sometimes you have to just like take the jump and go, and also like learn to be kind to yourself, reframe that like self-talk, be forgiving to yourself when you do mess up. And remember, and I like heard this in a million places though, that like life happens for me, not to me. So even when there's a hard lesson, even when I mess up, even when I slip into hypervigilance and I'm like, oh my gosh, you did it again, like you messed this up, like there's the trust in like, okay, but what can I learn from this? What can I do? How can I correct this? How can I continue to be a student of life and embrace that? Okay, this is another reminder. I'm getting this again on this life path, facing this lesson again. It's an opportunity to learn and to get better at it. And again, it's like, it is, I feel like I keep coming back to this. It's like a mindset shift. And I think sometimes people are like, okay, we get it, positive thinking, right? But it's not, it's mindset shifts through action. And that's the thing that I feel like sometimes gets lost in the conversation of it, is like, if you're changing your mindset around anything, again, you can't just like meditate your way to success and change. Like you have to acknowledge it and be like, set the intention. Like I'm going to shift this thing, this mindset. I'm going to shift from scarcity to abundance. Let's use that as the example. But like, you're not always, like sometimes you're still going to operate from scarcity, and sometimes you're going to be afraid that, I don't know, a bill comes in and that you're going to be like, oh my God, like I need to fix my car and it costs $1,000. Like I'm going to have no money. And I've gotten into those cycles where usually mine comes down to, I think probably back from when my lung collapse thing. And I was like, how am I going to pay rent? And I had to move back in with my parents. Like for years, the story I would say to my husband is like, I would freak out about something with work, and it would go to the fact that like we were going to end up moving back in with our parents and back homeless. And he was like, what? Like, in what world do you think that like you messing up an email that goes out for your course is somehow going to end up? But that was the story. It was like, if I do this, no one's going to buy this. And if no one buys it, then we're not going to make any money. If I don't make any money, then I can't pay my rent. If I can't pay my rent, it's fine. I guess I'll just move back in with my parents. And it was like, really, off of an email that you're sending out? That makes absolutely no sense. And that felt real on some level to me, you know? And I think it's like acknowledging that and then also doing the action work to teach yourself that that's not true. No, I'm going to send the email out and then like that didn't happen.
Something that sometimes pisses me off is when people are like, it's not that deep. You're right. You sending an email out was not that deep, but it's so rooted in this
Yes. Yeah.
deep feeling. Of course, that's what I think sometimes people get wrong about anxiety or panic. Why are you freak? It's not a big deal. It's okay. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're right. On a surface level, it's fine. Someone said that to me today. It's okay. I'm like, well, I'm clearly responding from something else where it's not okay. It's
Right.
not okay in me.
Right.
I understand in this very moment it's okay. But if we don't, again, and this almost goes opposite of what I was saying, not to be hyper vigilant, but if we aren't willing to actually look beneath the surface
Yeah.
of what sits underneath the response and the
Yes.
reaction, then I think that's where, myself included, I get resistant about, when everyone says, be positive. I'm like, yes, but hold on. People are not just like acting from these places of upset that are surface level. It's what,
Correct.
feelings buried alive never die. They
Yeah.
sit there and they show up in these different ways, like you with your email.
Yeah.
And it's so funny we're talking all this perfection on full moon Virgo lunar eclipse day, where literally it's all about letting go of perfection, letting
Yeah.
ourselves live in the mess, understanding that living is a practice. And this
Yeah.
idea, I think in wellness, that has become the toxic part of it, is like you do it and you're done. You
Yeah.
do one level of shadow work, you take like a 3-week course, journaling course, and it's a lifelong. And I think your
Right.
work as a teacher, a leader, a mentor, an entrepreneur is the constant, your willingness to reinvent yourself and actually look at yourself within the work, and not what everyone else is doing wrong or how everyone else can be better, right?
Yes.
Wrong in quotations if you're not watching the YouTube, but it's not about what's going wrong. It's like, okay, how is this showing up again? How is my stuff coming up again? I choose how I get to
Well, and
respond
I
to it. And
think it's
yeah.
also like there's been times that I've remembered, I think it goes back to a certain extent, like, okay, so if we're goal-oriented people, right? Back to like the upbringing of it, and it's human nature. Like you need to have something that moves you forward. I think one of the things I've also learned along the way is like, okay, then you achieve that goal. You're not like
What
forever
now?
done. Yeah, like it's like, and this is why you see like people, child Hollywood stars or people with these like who then end up like off the rails because it's like, what else do you do? What's next, right? Like what is the next goal? What's the next place? And to exactly what you're saying, it's almost like just adopting, accepting like the curiosity of like, how do I keep learning? How does this keep unfolding? What's the next thing that I have to do? And part of that is like, then when you set the new goal or the next goal, there's learning that has to happen. And it would be like so fucking boring if we didn't have that. Like if you just knew everything, like that sucks too. And I think that's the piece that we need to provide perspective of, is like sometimes the hard stuff and like the learning and the trials and the tribulations and the failures along the way is also like where the fun comes in, if we can allow it to be fun. It doesn't mean that it's always easy, and sometimes like it sucks when you're in it, but also it's like otherwise all of us would like still be elated that we graduated from college. There was a time, right, that was like the hardest goal. Like all I could think of was like, one day I'm going to finish and I'm going to get my college diploma and it's going to be so awesome. And that day it was awesome. And you take pictures with your family. I'm not like, I'm not like, yay, 20 years ago I graduated from college. Like there has to be another thing and another goal and another season. And each of those seasons are these chapters where like there's always going to be learning involved in them, and there's always going to be things that influence that, and that means we're always going to fail a little bit, and it's not like bad. That's okay. You know what I mean? And I think an understanding that sometimes part of that is us, like you said, like embracing and looking a little deeper as to where some of those feelings are coming from is the only way. When we can adopt that with curiosity, is the only way for us to learn. But it's hard to do that if we don't give ourselves, kind of going back to where this started, like if we don't give ourselves place to like pause. If you're just in the hustle mode 100% of the time and you're in burnout, there's no room to even examine like the why of things because you're just so tired. and I think
Mhm.
some of it has to come from the curiosity of like, let me give myself a minute. Like, why do I feel like this? Like, where is this coming from? Is this a bad thing, or is this pushing me up against discomfort that's like forcing me to grow and change? But we have to allow ourselves the space to actually like feel into that sometimes too.
And I think, especially coming from that like Capricorn, Pluto, 20 years, like we talked about, the hustle culture, it was really attached to external goals. I want the house, I want the job, I want the title, I want the money. Me too. I'm
Yeah,
not saying I
same.
don't want those things. I'm not saying I have a lot of Capricorn placements. You have Taurus moon.
Taurus moon.
Taurus
Taurus
moon.
moon.
I argue that if you are a soul in 2026, you are here to develop a relationship to the material.
Yeah,
I do feel that way. But
totally.
I think when you're not willing to pause, like you said, and realize, is it the house? Is it the relationship? Is it the status? Or is there, I'm scared to send this email because, and it goes all the way back to the
Yeah,
fear of having to move back in with your parents. If you're not willing to pause and sit in the discomfort, like you said,
yeah,
and trust that no amount of hard work or no amount of tangible achievement is going to actually solve that problem of security or worth. That's like mine perfectionism. I always say I'm a recovering perfectionist too. And part of my astrological like soul contract is letting go of that need to do things right.
yeah,
I always am coming up against my worth, like thinking that if I work harder, do more, or am funnier, or kinder, or a better friend, or a better partner, that I will finally be worthy. And
yeah.
that stuff is never going to solve the problem of me not believing it, just like it never solved the
Right.
problem of you, like not feeling safe and secure. So the pause, like that sacred pause, is. I'm laughing because I literally wrote that in my full moon post
Did you
today.
really? Isn't that so
Like
wild how things
the
just align?
sacred, like making quiet the sacred ritual to
Yeah,
pause and realize, oh, it's not the surface level thing, it's the thing underneath the thing.
100%. And it's interesting because if you had told me over the years that I would be someone talking about being quiet and pausing, that's crazy. Because as you very well know, the
Well,
quietness, like
both
I
of
can
us.
talk to, yeah, the hole in the wall. But it's just that, like, and it's, it like my astrology stuff, like I'm an Aries sun, but Aries North Node as well. And like
Hmm.
so much of that Aries, like battle stuff, right? War piece of it has been so much a part of that journey. And like when I've even like worked with my business coach who is an astrologer, she's like, you're comfortable, that idea of like, I'm good, I'm like, I'll just burn it to the ground. And that's like my thing. Like when something's not working, I'm like, I'll let it burn again, and then I'll just fight my way back up. And she's like, you can also though battle or fighting, you can do it from a place of strategy too. It's not always right. There's like different versions of moving things forward and fighting through challenges. And it doesn't have to come, kind of like what you said, it doesn't have to come from that like hardship place of hard work. Like it can
Hmm.
still feel easier. I don't know that it ever feels easy. And I'm like cautious to ever say like that things can feel always at ease. And because again, I think like there's a lot of that piece of the wellness world that's toxic too, of like, oh, just let things feel easy. And it's like, okay, or let things flow. Yes. But I don't know that it always feels like another positive
Comfortable.
psychology
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, like it's like happy people aren't happy 100% of the time. And that's the piece of it, is like a sense of ease and things moving forward doesn't always mean that or finding spaciousness doesn't necessarily, you have to like push up against discomfort sometimes. And that's
Hmm.
not always fun, but that's where like the spaciousness exists, right? And it's like, it's learning to embrace all of it and like the full scope of things. Like you're not happy 100% of the time. Sometimes it's also just sitting in the grief and the sadness, letting that metabolize so that you can come back to the good feelings on the other side, and letting both exist. And I think that that's a really important piece of that pause, like you said, is like that diving deeper in that sacredness of like, it's also okay to just like not be okay 100% of the time.
I don't
That's
even
okay
think.
too.
And the quiet too, it's just, I think Kate and I are both fire sons. Are you Aries Mercury? No, you're Pisces
No,
Mercury.
no,
You're
I am
Pisces
Pisces
Mercury.
Mercury. I
I'm
actually
a
have more
fire.
Pisces. I have more Pisces in my chart than I
and
realized
thought.
for a long
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
We're both fire sons, so we're getting pissed off. We're
Yeah.
not passing that. We're not I mean, anyone who knows me knows I'm certainly not passing, but
No.
if you don't know Kate, we're not passing over it.
No.
I like to think of it as, especially for my fire sign placements out there, it's almost like our birthright. We're quick to heat and we're quick to
Yeah.
cool. And the
Yeah.
faster we give in to the fire, the more we can say like, okay, I passed through it. Like
Yep.
I went through it, not around it. And I think a lot of the times I'm experiencing this right now. If you have a fiery placement, I'm sure you can relate to this, Kate. We're just so quick to act. We have the fire, so we want to fix the problem, make it right, have the conversation, do the thing, solve, get it done. And for us, sometimes, or anyone with fire placements, I think it's more about going against your instinct,
Mhm.
pausing enough to hear. And I know I'm in a period right now where I always want to jump back into things, and I'm forcing myself to just not have a vision, which is really hard, and just like live my life, just like not
Yeah.
have to be proving something, which is
Yeah.
really uncomfortable for me.
And sometimes it's also like you just don't necessarily, at least for me, are you Manny-Gen in human design?
I'm a straight manifester, so
I'm
I'm
straight
lighting that shit on
manifestor.
fire and walking
Okay.
away.
I'm
I'm
a
just lighting the fire and
I
walking away.
I'm a generator. Again, I'm not an expert in human design, but it's like the solar plexus, like
You have the gut instinct.
the
I'm the
gut instinct thing.
emotional.
And for me,
Yeah.
sometimes what it is and what comes into that is to kind of what you were just saying is like, I think I'm very quick to be like, okay, what's the right answer? I want the right answer. I want to fix this sometimes. And again, it's like in that go mode, that fire mode, that push forward. And sometimes I like don't have the answer yet. And I think that that's hard. And so there are times that I'm like, well, I'm just going to do this because I need to just get it done. And I
Mhm.
think that's like a habitual thing too, where part of learning to slow down is like, it's also okay to not have the answer for a minute and to like need to collect more data or more information or have time to check in and like truly be like, okay, but what actually feels like the right next step forward? And that's hard. It's hard when we're breaking through childhood patterns, breaking through a society that's like grind, hustle, go, forward, forward. When it's like really, I think the piece of it is like sometimes like steadying the foundation and taking the minute to pause is going to actually let you jump further forward in the long run than if you're just like weaving in and out along the way but have no real direction to do that. And it's like unfolding some of those patterns or breaking some of those habits that are so deeply ingrained, I think, in a lot of us.
Yeah, and we've been talking so much about the work required to be in relationship to yourself and like
Yeah.
to live the life you really want to live.
Yeah.
But I think a big part of the life you've created for yourself is the people you've surrounded yourself with. Going back to what you said about we're the 5 people we surround
Yeah.
ourselves most with. And if you don't have that, listening to podcasts and calling in expanders in this way,
Yeah.
right? But I would be remiss to not get into some of the community aspects of what you've built in
Yeah.
this episode, because I think it is such a I think so many people misunderstand what leadership is. And I think of you, I think of Patrick, Kate's longtime business partner, one of my favorite people just to rag on, but also be in friendship with, and you. And you've had so many iterations of that community, and even in your failures,
Yeah.
quote unquote, right? With
Yeah.
pandemic and Hudson Yoga
Mhm.
Project and that being so out of your control, the way you've taken people with you and continue to build them up. Why is that so important to you as like an entrepreneur? And how do you work in some of the things that you've been working on with the people you
Yeah.
lead or the people we work with or the community in general?
Thank you for saying that and bringing that up. I like it's so boring to do life by yourself. Like it just is like it's like part of I think what I set out to do initially when I left. Actually, even when I was a high school teacher, I felt like very strongly about like having good relationships with my colleagues. But like we spend the majority of our time in our lives like at work for most of us. Or if you don't work and you're a stay-at-home mom or whatever, it's still then you're spending the majority of your days like being with your kid, like whatever it is. It's like if you don't create community outside of just like your personal life, friendships, and family, it's so lonely then to go through life. And how much more fun is it to do things surrounded by people that inspire you and that you just enjoy being around, you know? And I think for Patrick and I, that was always like a main thing, was like, we want to show up every day. It's not just that we loved teaching yoga. It was like, who do we want to be with? Who do we want to teach yoga to? And what teachers do we want to hang out with in between classes? And if I don't want to like show up and have someone at the front desk that is miserable and doesn't want to be there. Like, I think a lot of it is just about like, how can we also create fun and socialness with our work? And I feel like prioritizing that always, and Patrick and I have always made that like a main point of anything that we've done, is like, that takes precedent, you know? Like, I would rather, as much as we can, prioritize like having the community, keeping the community together, even if sometimes that means that like it's not 100% of the time. There are people that it's like, there are people in our community, for example, who haven't paid for a yoga class from me and Patrick in, God knows, probably since like a decade ago. And I know you know of some of them. And people have been like, at some point you have to put your foot down. And I'm like, do we though? Like, we're still fine. Like, the business is still fine. And these people become part of the fabric of the community. And like, does it benefit the community sometimes more to have those people who've been with us for a decade and feel taken care of by us and let some of the other stuff go? I mean, it's like just a small example, but I think so much of that success is driven by the joy that you get to bring when you show up and like work with people that you really enjoy being. And I think that it's a lot easier to be like all in on the work that you're doing and think about it all the time when you genuinely like going there. Like, I don't think I've ever, what a gift it has been that there was a time in my life that Sunday afternoon would roll around and I'd start to get those like Sunday scaries of like, oh my God, like I have to go to work tomorrow. And like, that sucks. Or I would have like Christmas break and then counting down those last 2 days with dread about having to go back to work. Or I operated in a world where I had months off in the summer, right? And it's like, you get that vacation time, but then it would be like the last week or two, like, oh my gosh, it's all going to start again. To now work 12 months of the year or however much, but like, that never happens. Like, Sunday, I'm like, oh, good, yay. Like, tomorrow I get to go teach my class and like see my people that I haven't seen in a couple of days. And I think that that is the gift of creating community, is that it just brings so much more joy to the work that you do and the people, or in the life that you're living, if you're surrounded by people that you genuinely like being with. And I think when that's the energy that you're bringing to anything you do, there's just more success there. You know, when people ask or show up, or the best compliment I think we get is like, you know, I'm in a season of life, as you know, like I have 2 young children and 1 more on the way at home. I can't teach the primetime classes that I used to teach at the studio. I'm not teaching at 6:30 p.m. and on the weekend mornings. And that is hard for me personally. Sometimes I miss that, and I like miss being there for those busy times. But then like, I'll run into students who are longtime students who can't take my classes anymore because I'm teaching midday. But they're like, oh my God, but it's so great because everybody here is so nice and so friendly and takes such good care of us in the classes. Or I go on a Zoom call with Yoga Renew and it's like, every teacher that we talk to, like they're just so kind to us. And it's like, that's the best compliment I could ever hear, is because it's not, nothing is built just around me and Patrick. It could never be successful if that's what it was. Like, if it was only on the fact that people thought we were nice and liked our classes, we could never be standing where we were, right? It's like the best thing that you get your people with you, and some of them have been like you, like for a decade, we've been working together. It's like, that's the best part, is that, and that's where the success can come from, and having that trust with people and understanding that everyone's coming at it from like a place of being well-intended and trying to take care of everyone the best that you can and showing up. And I think that's where true growth comes. Yeah. It's just more fun too.
Yeah.
Like, it's too boring.
I mean, you and I are so like the definition of people. Like, we want to be, you know,
I'm also like the ultimate extrovert. I don't really like to be alone.
yeah, no, I mean, me too, which is, you know, maybe we could do some work on that ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also think, you know, people think about yoga as they refer to it as like, well, my yoga practice,
Yeah.
right? And the way you experience it, like most things in life, like is such a singular, even the love you share with another person, like
Yeah.
the way you experience that love is your singular expression and experience of it. But I think what you and Patrick do so beautifully and why people follow you everywhere is you make it, it's not just a singular practice. It's like the coming together of people and like what happens when not only you're moving your bodies collectively in this like beautiful, communal, safe, supportive space, but how empowering it is to develop the relationships and work together as a class. And even the structure of our classes that, you know, the way everyone in the peak pose comes together and you're learning it together and trying it together. And I think it's a really important reminder that we all need right now, not just because Aquarius is in Pluto, but because of the way the world is currently, that community is more important than the value of the dollar and
Yeah.
how much you have in your pocket or how many classes you can pay for or, you know, X, Y, and Z. It's about that is so much more powerful than the actual surface level part of it.
And I think when you move from that space, like what I've also learned, and it's so interesting because this kind of ties back into this idea of abundance, everything that we've been talking about is like, it's not easy to always put that as the priority. But the more you do that, I have learned over the years, it really does pay off tenfold, you know? And it's like that there have been things, you know, with Yoga Renew, even on like the digital side. And I feel like our partner Nick is so generous with stuff like this, where like if people reach out and they're like going through something, they're like, hey, like, here's my story. Do you offer scholarships? Like, I think we're so like, yeah, great. Like,
Yeah.
please come in, please do this. Just promise that like, if you take this course and you do this training, you're going to go share this with your community. And you don't always know how that turns out, but there have been like many times that someone's like, hey, you know, you guys gave this to me on a scholarship and like things have turned around for me and like this is what I'm doing now. And that ripple effect is so important and it comes back in the long run, I think, to benefit people. And I think when you can move that mindset to a place of abundance and trust that, like, you know what, it's okay, I'm going to give this one away and trust that it comes back. And I recognize that that is like a privilege and that's not always possible for people. And I have been in this space where I was like, there's no way I could give something out for free right now because I just, every single penny, you know, matters. And I have been in that space. I know what that feels like. It's so challenging and difficult. And if you can, for the most part, try to still find a way to offer some type of community focus and community building and like letting people in and helping the neighbor and helping to create these experiences, it does in the long run, I think, come back and benefit not only everybody else but you. Like it is this kind of communal thing that we get to take part in. And it's so important and special. And we don't all do this by ourselves. That's the thing, right? Like none of us like to operate alone. Like you said, like, yes, it's your yoga practice. Yes, it's your individual experience in anything, but it's happening in whether you like it or not. Every decision still affects the people around you. And it's like being mindful of that, I think, is really important.
Yeah. And before we close out, I just want to remind everyone my favorite story about how we're even here today. Like a decade ago, I was looking on social media, and even though Kate and I are both fire signs and have a lot of similarities, like our vibes are, if you're watching the video, you're black and red and all white. A white shirt, white. Our aesthetics are very different. But I was swiping on Instagram, and it was at a time in my life where I had lost, like I say, everybody died. And I saw, I don't even know, maybe it was Hoboken Girl or something. I saw a picture of Kate. I wasn't into yoga. And she was doing probably like crow pose, something beautiful. And I was like, huh, she's going to be my friend. And I thought, that's such a weird thought. Why? What? I don't even know. What's wrong with you?
Girl.
And this is before I did any of the things I do now. And I was like, that's weird, Katie. You need to put that away. Put that away. And then a few months later, I applied for a job and it happened to be at Hudson Yoga Project and it was your yoga studio. And then even
It's so
when we
funny
stopped
because you
working.
didn't tell me that then. Like
No,
this.
because I was horrified that I had the thought. I was not okay sharing my those thoughts, but I didn't tell you that then, but we became really
Yeah.
friendly then, not so much me and Patrick, but that we got there.
Yeah.
And then, like, there was iterations after, you were like, "We're opening a new thing," and I was still at my other. Then
Yeah.
something when I left my long-term job, something in me kept saying, like, "Message Kate, message Kate."
Yeah.
And I finally listened to it because it was still that voice that was
Yeah.
insecure about thinking you were gonna be my friend 10 years ago, and here we are today.
It is.
Manifestation is real.
It so is, and I think but, like, I love stuff like that too, you know what I mean? And I think it's also what's been so fun for me over the years of our relationship, and I remember, like, when you came to Hudson Yoga Project, and I remember, of course, like, that was early in, like, the raw time of when you had been dealing with, like, a
Mhm.
lot of loss and stuff, and we're early on your journey of, like, becoming a Reiki healer and all of that. And I remember I had done my Reiki level 2 certification, I
Mhm.
think, at that time. And it was not a time that I feel like there was that much Reiki around, and it was
No.
not my path, as you know. Like
Yeah.
I love receiving Reiki. It wasn't to be a Reiki healer, it was not my path, but I had studied it. And I just remember thinking you were like so fun and cool, but you were guarded at the time
Yeah,
because you were
very much
dealing
so.
with a lot. And I was like, I am gonna, as you know, and as I'm sure we found in this episode, I
And
can't
I do
ever
it too,
shut up.
clearly.
And I was like, I am gonna make her like me. And I just remember Sunday mornings talking to you and sometimes being like, I know she doesn't really want to hear this, but I'm just gonna keep on going. But what was so cool about that is that I do feel like I remember then when you like decided to go through your Reiki training and we started talking about like the early pieces of that journey. And then I feel like a lot of that when the pandemic happened and things were closed for a bit, I didn't get to see some of that. But then when we reconnected and you sent me that message and all of this happened, you came in having like all of this like new training and stuff like that. And
Mm.
I've gotten to watch you just fully step into that and embrace it. And this podcast is such a beautiful iteration of that. And to be able to share your insights and gifts with the world in this way has just been the best blessing. And I'm so honored to just have been on the sidelines seeing it and to call you
Mm.
my friend. Thank you, Instagram, for talking about algorithms and curating the content. Full
Ugh, it's
circle.
not all bad. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. But I love you so
I
much,
love
and I'm so
you.
grateful to be able to share this with the world and all your
Yes,
wisdom
thank
and all
you.
your gifts.
Thank you. You're just the best. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Breathe In, Scream Out. Thank you, Kate. I love you. I'm so grateful to you for everything. So much you have added to my life in both friendship and career, all the ways you see things in me that I don't even see in myself yet. I think so many people feel that way about you. And I feel so lucky that I got to spend this time with you and also share this with my audience. So if you're listening, thank you for tuning in. All of the show notes have ways where you can follow Kate, where you can find ways to work with her, whether that's through Yoga Renew, Rooted, or one-on-one. I'm so glad that I got to share this time and space with you all, especially you too, Kate. And I can't wait to breathe in and scream out with you all again.